welcome to the BMC IMS Webinar Series extract functionality provided by the MAXM Reorg EP product. Today's webinar is being recorded. At this time, I'd like to turn the conference over to Mr. Andy Andrews. Please go ahead.
Welcome you today to the BMC Webinar Series. Today we'll be talking about the extract functionality, and we have presenter James Wilson, who actually wrote this functionality. So without further ado, let me turn it over to James. So James?
Okay, so we're going to talk about the extract functionality in Reorg. It's one of our newest additions we added in version 5 to the Reorg suite. About a little bit of where the motivation came from, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about the high-level structure and the use case, basically, and then I'm going to get right into some examples so we can see the nuts and bolts of how we really put this stuff together. First reason is there's a lot of common challenges in IMS that come up too often, and these things related to IMS data, changing it in uniform ways, such as filtering out segments and things like that in the database, or restructuring, moving fields around in a segment, so things like masking out and scrubbing sensitive data from databases, and often the answer to these problems ends up being to write a DLI program. And there's nothing wrong with DLI programs, but they're kind of a lot of overhead to design and write and debug and iterate over these, COBOL 1 or whatever programming language in order to solve some problems that tend to be kind of ad hoc or not repeated. You don't usually get a whole lot of reuse out of these things, and so that overhead is a little bit pricey. Sometimes there's an alternative to write user exit for, say, an unload or a load or something, and that helps a little bit because it's a smaller scope, it's a smaller program, but it's still, you have to write a whole program, and so that these common challenges end with some kind of less than optimal solutions. And so what we created was to sort of define with a higher level syntax some of these manipulations and sampling things without writing an actual DLI application. Things it can do, I won't say it can do anything, but it's flexible with what all of the functionality is. First of all, sampling filtering is pretty simple, straightforward to do. The way it does that is with just either by a frequency or a count or a limit, those kinds of things. Or you can actually look at fields inside the root or whatever segments, and it's more flexible than, say, a sparking, if someone's familiar with that, where you can, in IMS, you can sometimes say, null val is if whole field equals a specific value, then filter it out. But you can actually provide any basically arbitrary condition to sample out these segments instead of just that null val. Flexible part is that it can modify. You can replace segments with fields. You can mask out or alter fields, or you can move the fields around and things like that. So that's where you get most power out of this, is that you can actually change the contents of the database. Okay, so where this feature fits is that it's our code, and it actually fits into more than just unload, but the first version was you can give it one extra keyword to activate the feature, and a DD with high-level syntax for the commands. And then what is any kind of unload file? There's 7 or 8 unload files, and then there's also specific unload files and things like that. So you can unload file so that it can be reloaded into another database or the same one, or you can actually forego the whole unload construct and just produce any arbitrary flat file you want. And the way we put it in is that it's seen in part of the reorg suite. So any other enhancements we put into unload or reorg will automatically get the benefit here. So say we have our own I/O engine and we have 64-bit enablement and zip offload, those kinds of things. So be part of unload, just an extra feature, it automatically get all those enhancements. And recently, this last version, we added support for clone. So you can do all these modifications and filtering and whatever you want to do as part of a clone command. So you create a copy of the database that has all the filtering or modifications. So I think that it removes a step, sort of. You would have before had to do a reload with the unload file. And you can just have the copy of the database and then iterate over that, do experimentation, or just see what's going to come out in an actual database. The way the syntax is structured, it's very hierarchical in nature. So it has a top level keyword called output file, and then words to control the overall process, such as sampling and limits and a format of the unload file, things like that. Down, well, actually, one of the sub keywords actually is format. So you can say BMC short, or produce an IBM long file, or you can actually remove the formatting altogether. Because an unload file is actually pretty simple. It's just a header, a trailer, and prefix. The header record precedes all the segment records, the trailer's at the very end, and the prefix is the first part of segment record. And so in the format statement, you can put you out your own header, or remove the header, or whatever segment prefix you want, and things like that. And this is where you get your kind of more desampling functionality is the select when. So it looks a lot like SQL. You can fill segments of any type based on inspector fields. Say anything this field equals 0, just remove it, or select this only when the field is a negative, or whatever you do to create of your data. Then this is the modification, replace. So you can say replace a segment, and you can put a condition on that saying replace this only when a certain set of fields match what you want. And you can refer back to fields or offsets in the segment, or any segment back up to the root. So that gives you quite a bit of functionality, quite a bit of flexibility to morph the data into your own image. And that's basically how it all fits together. What I wanted to do next is just start on samples. This is the simplest example I could think of for normalizing example. So let's say we have an application that, we say we have a database that has a field that is numeric, but so the population utility, let's say the COBOL program created the database, sometimes didn't initialize that field. So sometimes that field is spaces when that means zeros, but not every other application handles that very gracefully. So what we want to do is through our database and find the times that field is spaces and it with zeros, so that it's always the same. Here's the structure. So it's going to look like in the JCL unload. So all the basic IMS DDs, Recon 1, Recon 2, Recon 3, IMS DD, all that stuff. And then the command is unload, and you put whatever options you want. And now the keyword to activate extract is extmds. A DD name, and then in that DD has your extract statements. Okay, so this is a pretty simple example. I have output file as my top level, and the form HD, which is the default, I think it's the default BMC format. And I have one replace statement. So replace my segment, root, and then layout fields. These field statements are going to be just first come, first serve. So it's going to just create these to create the new root segment. You can see the first field here is this 4 zeros, just a character literal 4 zeros. And that lines up exactly with the field 1. Start equals 1, bytes equals 4. And then field 2, field 3, and root key. So those all match 100%. And I have laws for when field 1 is spaces. So it just says when field 1 is spaces, replace it with this. It looks exactly the same, except it's all zeros in field 1. Okay, that's how replace statements work. Is you declare replace segment and then lay out your fields one after another. And there's a lot of sub keywords on these, but these are sort of the most uniform. Just put field names. Okay, so I'm going to next what comes out. So that's my root segments in my database. I have some of them have spaces in that first field, and some of them have numbers. So I have, segment header is the part precedes the segment records, and then all same segments come out except the replacements done in the spaces ones. All right. Another example. This is sort of the same kind of it's kind of the same principle in that they're a database that's running into some space issues, saying in a particular year I had times more records than I'm used to having. So and because now I don't have that data too much anymore, so I don't need to keep it in the live database. I can kind of move it off to an archive or sort of a legacy database just for archival purposes. So what I have here is actually I do 2 runs. One to pull out only the old records. Anytime this root key is this date, January 1st, 1999, say, and then produces an unload file, and that's going to be my archive or whatever I want to do. And then I can extract again, and all I did was invert the condition. So instead of equal, it's greater than. So this is going to be the sort of the complement of that set. And then what I do is when I have that in the file, that's what I do my reload with, and my data is pruned, you must say. Yes, so the concept is just that you can do the sample statement. It's really simple syntax for saying only select roots based on one little when clause for the fields. That's sort of a more example. So only to an unload file that you can put back into a database. What it's going to do is produce just a flat file. A lot of times there's sort of a de-chaining of applications. You might have your database, you run your DLI program that just kind of looks at the database and produces a keys file or a trigger file, some people call it. All that does is the input to another application that does selecting or reporting based on those files. So with this kind of construct, you can actually replace what first program that just produced a file. You can just do straight with one step here. To declare the output, you say undefined, and inside those parentheses would be where you lay out your own header and prefix and trailer if you want them. Example, I don't define any of them, so they're all going to be omitted. It's going to be the file has the content that I'm going to define with my select and replace statements. And of course, by default, statement for a segment, it's just going to, the set itself is just going to get put down, and that's it. So this, I'm going to try to walk through step by step. Okay. What we, I guess I didn't say that the segments here are customers, the root account is the child. Pretty saying replace the segment with ID. So that's maybe my segment key or something. And that's going to happen every time. Every customer segment is going to get replaced, and it's only going to have the key. And there's no file metadata either, so that the file really is bare bones. It's just the key. Here I have I choose the depend based on a certain criteria. Okay, so here I have kind of a special syntax for date, open date. So I guess I didn't say before, but this language is capable of date arithmetic. So by default, it just says a date is 8 years. It's YYMMDD. That's the default. There's a special syntax you can use to change that and interpret it into any format you can probably think of. YYYYDDD. Example. But just keep the syntax cleaner, I kept it with the default. Okay, and also there's an implied significance here when you do date arithmetic. Say ampersand date is today minus the date segment, and by default it's going to interpret that as a number of months. There's syntax to change that to the number of years or the number of days. So again, flexible, but I kept it to the default to keep it readable. So saying select the account segment, but only it's been open for a year, 12 months. Okay. Here I need another condition. I say the balance has to be bigger than this number. The balance is stored in cents. So this, what is it? 100,000. So it's $1,000. So it might be something like select customers, like a preferred customer type thing. So the account that's been open for a whole year and they have at least $1,000. So maybe these customers an email for their, for a promotion that's available to them because they're a preferred customer, something like that. So I only chose the accounts that met criteria. And then after I selected them, so say any of the customers I did select are come out with a record that looks like ID. It's actually referring to the root that it's child of. And then RP star for preferred or something. And then I put the type, so the checking account or savings account or whatever. So I'm going to come out with is a file, literally companies followed by any of their preferred accounts if they have them. So there might be an application that runs through and sends emails. You could read each record starts with the customer ID. That field is the same thing. ID and field customer.id, those are going to match. So an application might read that and then count the number of times that customer's ID appears, and particular email based on that or whatever. But it's just going to replace a DLI program that used to run through the database, as a BP or something, and produce this kind of file. I want to show what comes up when you when you here arguments. So I try to represent the hierarchy as best as possible. I have each, then everyone has a checking and a savings account. The first field, I guess, be the date that was opened in that format, YYYYMMDD, and then I put this hex value because it's just a binary number. Okay, I should have mentioned that too. That when you use arithmetic, balance greater than 100,000. The extract language actually interprets the field type in the base. So this value here, this I guess, is I didn't say, but it's a binary field. It interprets it just as its raw binary value. If it were characters, I would assume it's numeric characters, and it would do the appropriate conversion. It converting to a uniform number under the covers, and then do the same comparison. So you don't, if your fields are defined and you want them to be interpreted, you don't have to do any specific syntax to choose them. You to say cast this. I know it's defined as characters, but actually in the data I want to interpret it as binary. So there's syntax to do that. But the idea was to keep it intuitive by default. Do the syntax that you can actually pull out fields based on position, length, type. You can extract the field here. It's bytes, binary, and then the arithmetic to it. There's syntax for that with it, kind of what you'd expect. Segment. I think it's the C's, and then you MOY. colon, so you can impose all those in the syntax itself, but the cleanest way to do it is actually have the fields defined in your metadata, the DVD itself. That's how the arithmetic all works. So that now these customers and my accounts in the database. When I'm going to step by this one root at a time here. You can opened 2017 February, so he's not been open for a whole year. Open for a whole year now, but not when I wrote this. Of his balance here, he's already been rejected. So the record that comes out is the root record, and it's just ID. The next one, see that the checking account doesn't have the balance needed, but savings does. So end up with two records, the root and the replaced savings with that eye catcher in the middle. So then you only get the root segment. And on the accounts qualify because of the balance. So you end up with all three records. So the line and ends up producing this key file, which maybe another application understands it. Maybe it's kept around for just studying purposes, like that. So the idea is that you can arbitrary files. You could even go so far as to use this syntax. This is a little bit outside the scope of what it was really intended for, but it is flexible enough. You can use this syntax to produce like a report. With this, you throw an eye catcher in, and then this field equals that. On these field statements, when you do a replace, you put a transform statement, and what that does is say, I know that I selected it as these binary or the string of numeric characters. A transform that says, okay, since it's a string of characters, transform this into packed. So make these numbers and get the necessary logic to create a packed field instead. So you can do these more often than not, you'd probably do the opposite, where you start with a binary field and you say transform this to characters. What we'll do is generate the necessary conversions to human displayable value. Right now, it's binary inside the database. But so that has a whole lot of flexibility when you're doing this kind of logic to produce a flat file, not necessarily to go back into a database. So the thing to keep in mind that it's very flexible. It's very sensitive to those types of your data. Okay, that is the last example I had. I'm good to open it up to any question one has.
Yeah, so if you get a Q&A window, we'll pull them off there.
It gets kind of dense in those statements, but
So we'll give her type it in.
I think I see one question there.
I'm putting in the chat.
I said chat. Okay. Is there still a possibility of pointer error if this is done with a database up to IMS? You see that? And another questions, but great product. Okay. So is there a possibility of a pointer error if this is done with the database up to IMS? The answer is same with unload. So there's two forms of unload you can do, and one of them is to say, don't authorize this, don't run it with integrity, just do dirty reads. In that case, it'll the same way as unload does. But by default, the answer is no, because it does reads with integrity by default. Okay. Oh, and same keywords. If you do with unload off, and it does encounter pointer errors, there's keywords to say pointer error except or pointer abend, and so you can control it with all those same unload constructs that are around forever. Part of the benefit of the reorg tools.
We also want to mention this is included in any flavor of MAXM product. So which one you have licensed, extract functionality is provided for you.
Yeah, it just comes along with unload basically.
Yeah, I never had a comment come in and unload. I'm missing the chat.
Okay, it's separate from the chat window. It looks like there's a Q&A bar.
Question that James has probably asked you directly. Q&A panel instead of to all panelists.
Oh, okay.
Oh, that's
privately
okay.
to you and no one sees it.
Oh, okay, so Joe, I have one question came in from Joe Palmieri. Is it included in mode release? Which code left? Yeah, what it released?
Version 5.0, which came out, and then the clone integration was 5.1.
Okay, so 5.1 is what we released last December, so 2 months ago. The 5.0 came out, I believe, so I would expect most people will be running the 5.0 code. That will be what we supported IMS 14 when we came out MAXM 5.0. Another question that came in, several months ago, I was told by BMC I could run an online unload similar to a snapshot image when I could unload a DB while it was access up. I believe it hooks up with XBM. Is that available with this product?
Yes. I won't say 100%, but pretty much anything you can think of that is supported by just a native unload, I won't even say native, BMC unload, will be available here. It will be available with the same thing because it really is an unload, an extra keyword. Now, not everything makes sense, but most infrastructural things, such as snapshot, are percent invisible to it. So yeah, it'll work with that stuff.
Questions that are kind of the same. You download this WebEx and will it be available to the public? Yes, we post all the WebExes. Our website is called watch.bmc.com, and just scroll down to the mainframe section and you'll see them. I've got them all tagged as the BMC IMS Webinar Series. And so you go through plenty of them out there, and they will be out there for watch.bmc.com works. So we have, we're planning them available. If you need a specific, actual copy of the presentation to download, then reach out to me directly at Andy_Andrews@bmc.com, or get to your sales rep. They'll get back to me real fast, and we can get you the actual presentation. Okay, the questions that are coming through. Give it a couple more minutes, see if anybody. I'm not seeing more questions that are coming through. So, with that, go ahead and wrap up.